I'll ask John.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks. This is Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole for Monday, December 12th. Under item 1, call to order. 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Osowski. Here. Weber. Lunsky. Here. Kavami.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Bean. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Under item 2, discussion items. 2.1, transfer of Class 1 alcoholic beverage license from Sin Bin to Taste Hospitality LLC. Ms. Dorsett, good evening.
Thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. The first item that you have before you, as President Sandy stated, is a transfer of a liquor license. What the Finance Department has received an application to transfer, it's a Class 4 alcoholic beverage license from Sin Bin to Taste Hospitality. This is strictly a change in ownership. They plan on having the same doing business as name Sin Bin. Sin Bin has held Class 4, and they've decided to sell their business to Taste Hospitality. This does require approval of City Council. Attached is also a letter from Sin Bin that is requesting approval of the transfer. This would, of course, be contingent upon review of the department's city attorney and payment of fees, but with that, we would recommend approval of the transfer.
Any questions or concerns? Motion's moved by Weigel, second by Osowski. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.2, transfer of Class 1 alcoholic beverage license from Knights of Columbus to KOC Hospitality.
All right, thank you,
Ms.
President
Dorsett.
Sandy, members of the committee. Similar to the last item, this is a transfer of a liquor license. So this is a Class 1 alcoholic beverage license, transfer from Knights of Columbus Building Association to KOC Hospitality. Doing business still to be determined the name of that, but it's located at 601 University Avenue. Knights of Columbus has held a Class 1 for several years. They have been closed and put their business up for sale. City Council had granted an extension out to 12/31 of this year, 2022, for the license to either be transferred to a new owner or to put into operation. The request has come forward, an application received to transfer this license, and there's a letter for requesting approval of that transfer attached to KOC Hospitality. But with that, similar to last, it does require council approval, and we would recommend approval.
Any questions or comments? Moved by Osowski, second by Weigel. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Just let the record show that Mr. Bean has joined us. Item 2.3, Northern Plains Nitrogen Letter of Intent Extension. Mr. Phelan, good evening.
Hey, good evening, Council President Sandy, members of Committee of the Whole. This is the NPN and letter of extension. I thought I'd go through a few highlights just for those that haven't been involved with Northern Plains Nitrogen. Also, I'm joined in this regard by Larry Mackey. He's the Chief Operating Officer for Northern Plains Nitrogen, so he's on the line too. I just wanted to show you a few slides, and this is from Mr. Mackey, along with other representatives of Northern Plains Nitrogen. They were at the state capitol last Monday. Mayor Bochensky, Keith Lund, and I joined, and there were meetings that Mr. Mackey held with Department of Ag, also with Bank of North Dakota, Department of Commerce, and others. Mayor Bochensky, Keith, and I joined him for a legislative briefing with, we must have 30 to 40 legislators that were there during their organizational session. Really great briefing. Larry and Clark and others on their team gave this presentation. It was well received. And specifically regarding the natural gas and how do we get that to Eastern North Dakota from the Bakken. So I think we highlight the fact that we've had really some positive agribusiness opportunities, and you can see by this particular map, we are in this green area of growing corn. Obviously, corn needs nitrogen fertilizer. So this map really highlights what we're doing. We've had some folks, when we've talked about our Fufang USA, there's no corn around here. Well, I think this map demonstrates that we have plenty of corn in our area. The other challenge, if you look at this map, obviously the deeper blue means the more demand for urea, and here's the nitrogen map, and you can see where both of these really follow the Corn Belt, and you can see where Grand Forks is. I think what the importance of this project is, we have this huge growing area, but we're at the end of the line for nitrogen fertilizer. And so most of the nitrogen fertilizer, I would say a majority of it is imported into our country. Even though we have this vast array of agricultural industries in our country, we still are importing a significant amount of nitrogen fertilizer. As Larry talks, generally that comes from up the Mississippi River. And so as you can tell, going from south to north, by the time you get north, it's a higher cost, lower supply, and we're in this area where we really need it. And so really that's the essence of why Larry always says this is a great spot to put a nitrogen fertilizer plant if you can. I'm going to go back to, there was also discussion at the meeting with Mr. Kringstad, who was the Pipeline Authority Executive Director, and there was lots of discussion at the state legislature regarding this Bakken natural gas pipeline. And so WBI is, it's an MDU Resources company, and they do a lot of, they're based in Bismarck, and they do a lot of work in the Bakken itself. So as they brief this particular side, the goal is to take this pipeline from Tioga, North Dakota, and basically follow that Highway 2 path to Grand Forks, to serve Grand Forks, and then later would serve down that I-29 pipe corridor with that pipeline. So that's the pipeline that was discussed. There was discussion with the state legislature. They set aside $150 million this current session. There was discussion with MDU Resources Group. We intended to set aside another $150 million to help subsidize this construction of this pipeline. And there was discussion about whether that's going to be enough. And so I think when we move into this legislative session, there's going to be a lot of discussion, and they're going to engage with Grand Forks about what it's going to take to get this pipeline to Grand Forks. The other part of the conversation is when we talk to the $150 million is the $10 million that the state set aside was for this pipeline. And this is the Viking pipeline on this side of the river, and that's to serve Grand Forks County. So when you look at that line, we always knew this pipeline going from west to east was going to take 3 to 5 years to construct, and therefore we couldn't wait for that pipeline to come, that we were going to have to pull off the Viking pipeline, and that's where that $10 million came into play with Fufang USA. So there was a lot of discussion about that and how do we make that happen. The state's interest is really moving this natural gas. The more natural gas that can move out of the Bakken, the more oil production we can move forward with due to flaring guidelines and the like. So this is really important for us to get the natural gas pipeline built so that we can get the natural gas pipeline to market, so that we can have additional oil production that we're not able to move forward with at this point in time. So it's really in the state's interest to do this. Obviously, that'll drive revenue, drive a lot of the state's economy. So at the meeting, there was a lot of positive discussion with our legislators that this is a great project. It's just how do we make this happen in the next session? And I suspect there'll be a lot of conversation about coming up in January. Where we come in is in front of you is a letter of intent, and we've extended this letter of intent several times since its creation in that 2013 to 2014 time period. And so really what we're asking to move forward with this letter of intent is that this is the site location for Northern Plains Nitrogen. This is the solid waste landfill right here. So the landfill, you can see where we're in this area right here in the landfill, and that landfill is going to get constructed in this direction. So it's going to go north, and then it's going to head west. The next project we're going to talk about is Epitome Energy, and Epitome Energy is their southern border is right here on 70th. So you can see where you're going to have Northern Plains Nitrogen, our solid waste landfill, and Epitome Energy are all lined up in a row on the west side of Interstate. Northern Plains Nitrogen, similar to, if we can move forward with Northern Plains Nitrogen, there's really a synergy between this project and Epitome Energy. And so I won't belabor Epitome Energy when we get to that, but I'm going to try to combine these two because I have a map in front of me. I can describe some of the challenges for both. Both of these projects are going to rely upon wastewater reuse or gray water. So what happens, Our wastewater treatment plant is at this location. So we treat the wastewater right here, and then there's a line that goes up here with our finished wastewater, and then it goes through this direction to the river. That's where our discharge is, down this line. So Northern Plains Nitrogen, as part of this agreement, when we developed this in 2014, was, I think, we're 6.9 million gallons per day of gray water that we would supply them for their production. There's, as also part of the discussion in our letter of intent, 0.9 MGD of potable water. And the reason why we put that 0.9 is we didn't have enough wastewater to supply their entire facility. Well, since then, a lot of things have happened. We've had growth throughout the city. We've integrated with East Grand Forks, and so that we have more than enough wastewater, not only to supply Northern Plains Nitrogen with all gray water for their production, but we have an additional, and the next request is with Epitome Energy. They want upwards of 400,000 gallons per day of our wastewater. And I think we talked last week, I think on an average day, we're between 8 and 9 million gallons per day of wastewater that comes into the city of Grand Forks. So they both are going to use wastewater. The other issue we have, whenever we're on this side of the west side of the interstate, we have to contemplate this airport right here, both commercial and UND. And so we've talked not only about air emissions, but we've discussed plumes and engagements with, the airport and UND Aerospace. So we're going to continue to work on that with NPN, but we'll also have to do that with Epitome Energy also to make sure that we're not causing a hazard with flights that are over our community. The other part we're going to have to do is, this is the, Highway 2 is down below the map right here. This is 69th Street right here, which we affectionately call the landfill road. So to get to our landfill, you go up this road past the lagoons, and then you go into our landfill. So this is a road that's been improved. Some of it's concrete, some of it's an improved gravel road for truck traffic. But with these projects right here, we're going to likely have to also improve 55th Street, which is this street right here. That's unimproved. And then this is 70th Avenue, that's going to have to get improved too as we move forward. So those are some of the improvements that are really going to be synergistic between Epitome and NPN. The other part of the NPN letter of extension is that they're going to have to discharge wastewater to the city of Grand Forks. They're going to use upwards of 7 million gallons today of our gray water, but they're going to discharge some of that back to the city in wastewater. And there's stormwater regulations that they're going to need in their area too. So all told, that's what this letter of intent really spells out back in the day. All of these were precursors to working on a larger development agreement that we've really gotten fond of working through with Fufang. So NPN was going to be the precursor to that. This letter of intent was really just to say that we're going to work in good faith on these areas of water that are going to be really important for this project to move forward with. Eventually, if the project was a go, Northern Plains Nitrogen, those items would get integrated into a larger development agreement that would talk about transportation and traffic and tax incentives. All those kinds of things would come into the development agreement. But this letter of intent was really just so they had some security that we would continue to work with them on these important measures. So that's Northern Plains Nitrogen. We've been going at 6 months at a time, just so that we can continue to get updates from Northern Plains Nitrogen regarding the progress. And hopefully we make a lot of progress in this session to deliver them natural gas. And the importance of this Bakken pipeline is that Northern Plains Nitrogen needs a lot of gas. So if Fufang needed 40,000 units of gas, yeah, I think Epitome Energy is somewhere, I'm going to say much less than that, maybe 10,000 units of natural gas. Northern Plains Nitrogen is 80,000 units of natural gas. So you can see the order of magnitude that we're talking. So they really need this Bakken gas that would come to this area. Industries like MDU that would want to build this pipe, they need an end user like them to make this cost effective for them. They just can't build. The federal government doesn't allow entities to build natural gas pipelines on hope. And so they really need some, an asset at the end that is going to buy the gas. So with that, that's kind of what's in front of you today, and I asked also Larry as part of the presentation, just give us an update on kind of where he's at with that primary investment and how he's feeling about this as we continue to work with that Northern Plains Nitrogen. Larry.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to participate from Brandon instead of having 4.5 hours to drive each way and an overnight stay. Thank you very much. But then, Todd, you stole all my thunder. I had a whole bunch of notes here of things to say, and you stole all my thunder. But that's okay. Grand Forks is the perfect location for our plant site. We have the whole country to look at. There is no better location for a nitrogen fertilizer plant today, no better than Grand Forks. It's as good as it gets. And there's a slide that you missed in there, Todd, that says that. But that's okay. I'll just say it for you now. Things that have changed in our project, we have become what you call blue. Today, a typical ammonia plant is called a gray plant, where the excess CO2 is vented. We will use a significant amount of the CO2 we produce to make urea, and we will then capture most of the remaining CO2 and put it in a pipe that it will be owned by Summit Carbon Solutions. They will transport it to the Bismarck area and sequester it, and that will make us blue, and that is a big deal. To try to finance the plant today, excuse me, and if you're not blue or green, it would be very difficult. We also will buy what's called RECs from Dakota Nodak, which is power generated from the wind farms, and that's green power. And of course, we're going to use your Grand Forks wastewater instead of using fresh water. So environmentally, this plant is about as good as you can get. I don't know anybody else who is doing that as much as we are. The turnout from the state legislators that Todd was discussing earlier a few minutes ago in Bismarck on December 5th was phenomenal. We thought maybe we'd get 12 or 15 legislators come and listen to us because we're asking for help from the state. So we wanted as many as we could get. It was standing room only. That room was designed for 40 people, and we couldn't get any more in there. And thank you to Todd, the mayor, and Keith Lund for coming and supporting us. It was very much appreciated.
Great,
so
thanks, Mr.
previous
Mackey.
to that, say again?
I said thank you, Mr. Mackey. Appreciate that. Good information.
Okay.
Was there anybody that had any questions for Mr. Mackey tonight? Mr. Phelan, so you were looking for us to extend the letter?
It would be to extend that attached letter for another 6 months, so it'd get us through the end of June, and we'd be back sometime here, again, in probably late May, early June, to have further discussions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Mackey? Moved by Weber. Is there a second? Second by Lunsky. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Mackey. We'll see you again in 6
Thank you.
months. Appreciate it.
I hope to see you before that.
I hope so. I look forward to it. Item 2.4, Epitome Energy Development Agreement Process Authorization. Mr. Phelan.
Council President Sandy and members of the Committee of the Whole, again, I kind of went over the particulars. I just have the map from, again, Dennis Egan is here, and you saw him last Monday, and so I have the slide up that really shows their site, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of differences. You know, number one, it's going to be wastewater reuse again. I talked about where that line is, so I think that's really going to line up well with us. I think on this particular project, one of the challenges we're going to have is we're going to have to improve a lot of the transportation systems, and so similar to what we asked for with Fufang, Number one, the development agreement's going to have transportation related. We're going to move forward with a traffic study, and it's going to identify some areas that we need to make improvements in our area, whether it's some of these rural roads or some off of state highways as we move forward. The other thing I wanted to highlight is that when we met with the townships, they really emphasized this housing district up here. I think it's called the Lemoyne Edition. And what they emphasized up there in that area is there's stormwater challenges. And so in this part of the country, the stormwater moves from north to east, and so it's trying to find the river. So that's where the drainage goes. Anyways, I guess this development right here, this housing is a bit of on an island. It doesn't have a lot of drainage, and so they've discovered that with some of the rail improvements here. So we're going to have to work on some stormwater solutions in this area, are going to be one of the challenges. And I think if this project moves forward, there's an opportunity where we can make the stormwater drainage better, not worse than what it is today. The other thing when we talk to the townships is that try to move the facility as far away from this residential subdivision as possible. And so, again, Dennis and his team were, quite receptive and want to be community oriented. They moved their site plan closer to 70th Avenue North in this area. Otherwise, it would have been kind of up here in the middle and closer to the subdivision. And I think that'll help us on 70th Avenue, having it closer to the network. I do want to point out one unique thing I want to incorporate into this development agreement that wasn't part of the Fufang development is that when we developed the landfill, we tried to buy out as many people that lived up there as possible that wanted to buy out as part of a solid waste landfill coming to your neighborhood, right? And so the city owns, in this area, we do not own the property on the very right here, but the city owns 3 or 4 of these properties right here. And so in order for them to move that all the way to the south, we will need to incorporate the sale of those properties as part of this development. And right now, my understanding from Dennis is they have a letter of intent of some sort to purchase this property up here, but they're going to need to work with the city as part of the development agreement to incorporate some of the city property that we've purchased as part of the development. That's going to be a unique part of this particular development. The other thing that's unique as part of this development, it's going to go through planning and zoning, annexation, and then we're going to have to provide them essential services, similar to what we did with the Highway 81 area up there. And the one difference in this area is this is in the Keith Lund discovered this is in the Manville School District. So it must be everything north of 70th Avenue North is in the Manville School District. So when we move forward, and if we move forward with a tax incentive, property tax, that's greater than 5 years, then we have to engage the county and we have to engage the school district. In this case, we're going to engage Grand Forks County, but we're going to engage the Manville Public School District instead of our Grand Forks School District. That's going to be a unique effort. The other thing that's going to be different in this way is that we've spoken, this is in Rye Township, and why did we meet with Rye and Faulkner Township? Fufang USA wet corn mill is in Faulkner Township. This plant is in Rye Township, and Faulkner Township is on this side of the line, is on the east side of the line, and then this is Rye Township. So they're really adjacent to one another, but we're going to work with Rye Township. They want the city of Grand Forks to lead this project. They want the city of Grand Forks to take over all the essential services and the infrastructure and the planning and zoning. They welcome all of that. As part of they want to be part of the process, but they want us to take the lead on all of that. The other challenge we're going to have is with all these facilities is that we want to make sure we can serve them from a public safety perspective. And so when we think of a facility like this, it's fire protection. And so one of the challenges is this is further away than than Fufang is. And we showed you maps of how we were going to serve Fufang USA with fire protection. This is further out. And so we're going to have some unique engineering on this, where they're going to have to probably have some more water supply on their site so that we can, as first responders, put out fires, responding, because our water infrastructure, unlike along that Highway 81 corridor, we're not really adjacent to that, so we're going to have some uniqueness with that, and our fire response. So we're going to have some different requirements on that, so that's a uniqueness as part of this particular development. The other part of this development is is in the Agassiz rural water system. And so we're going to work with Agassiz Rural Water, and they might be more advantaged to provide water supply in this area. We're generally, where the city is used to providing all the water supply, I think they're going to be more advantaged to do the water supply in this area and work with the State Water Commission. So I think we're going to end up with an agreement with Agassiz Rural Water in providing potable water service in this way. And we may even have to ask them, if they can build their lines larger than they normally do in a rural water system, so that maybe there's some better fire protection than they normally would entertain in industries like that. So we've already started some of those conversations with Agassiz Rural Water. It's been really positive and constructive working with Agassiz Rural Water, so we're really fortunate to have worked with them. We worked with them in that Highway 81 because we're going to take over some of their customers in that area as we move forward. So we've already engaged, and that's why the importance of working with Faulkner, with Rye Township, and Agassiz Rural Water. We've engaged them up front because I think they're going to have to be part of some of the infrastructure solutions in this particular area. With that, as I've discussed with Mr. Gosted, it's going to have a lot of the similar aspects that we had with Fufang. We have not, different than Fufang USA, is that we have not negotiated a tax incentive in this particular case. As you recall, one of the criticisms is that when we brought Fufang to you, we already had pre-negotiated a tax incentive that was that 20-year, 90% the first 10 years and then 75% the second 10 years. We haven't done that in this case. When we talked with Mr. Egan, well, we're going to try to, they certainly had a deal in Minnesota and they had a deal in Crookston. And so we want to make sure that we work in tandem with this developer and try to find something that would mirror what they were anticipating getting in Minnesota. So we'll work through the particulars. And I think this time the city council will have more engagement regarding the tax incentives than perhaps we did before. The other part of this development, and I know we raised some ire with the Highway 81 folks with the annexation. So with this annexation, we would just annex the areas for the facility itself that we need as part of moving forward. So this is going to be, it's not like there's an adjacent commercial area so this would be solely annexing the property itself. I think it's going to be more similarities in the development agreement than differences if you look at the Fufang USA project with a few differences. And I would say Dennis has been remarkable to work with. And I think we have a really solid partnership, and now we have to work on the particulars. And we really appreciated working with him. And one of his first things he asked in some of his slides that he wanted to make sure that he worked with us on the development agreement, and that provided a really great roadmap so that he knew the goals and expectations that you would have ultimately as a city council. So with that, I would maybe just hand it over to Mr. Gosted about any other things that I may have missed, and then also maybe have Dennis bat clean up on any other further things.
Thank you, Todd. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I really don't have much to add. I would just echo Mr. Freeland's comments that we've got a good baseline for a development agreement now. I'm not suggesting that every term would be identical, but I would expect that it would mimic the Fufang USA development agreement. And I know Mr. Egan and his team has already gotten a copy of that. And I would expect to be able to work with their attorney and work through various matters within the development agreement. So again, you're going to see one that's going to look very familiar to you already as we work through the various issues with Mr. Egan and his legal team. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. But again, you've seen one before, and I would expect to see a similar version with Epitome.
Thank you, Mr. Gosted. Any questions for Mr. Gosted while he's available? Hearing none. Great. Mr. Egan, anything to add?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to be back in front of you. Looking forward to hopefully working with Mr. Gosted in the city on what that development agreement will look like. I would just add on the fire protection side of it, that is an issue that we've already internally addressed, and we will have storage tanks on site. So as we continue to move this through, we'll be able to share those kinds of information with you as well. But we'll have an hour's worth of fire suppression and available water on site to be able to supplement anything that we may need from the city of Grand Forks while they assemble their team. We will continue to be in front of you and keep you apprised of progress that's being made on all fronts. But again, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Egan. So, Mr. Phelan, you want a motion and a second to allow staff to engage with Epitome to negotiate the terms of the development agreement, yes?
Yes.
Correct. Is there a motion on that? Mr.
I have a
Weber, yeah,
couple
comment?
questions
Sure.
first, if I
Certainly.
may.
Yeah.
First of all, Mr. Egan, it's a great project. I've also been really impressed with your interest in coming in and being a good corporate citizen, a member of the community, and partnering with the city in those ways. So, Todd, this is more a question for you, but it relates to the tax incentives in some ways. That has not been negotiated yet. Is there in any way that the city of Grand Forks, to be crass about it, did we poach this project from Crookston in any way?
Council President Sandy and Council Vice President Weber, the short answer is no. And we were introduced to Mr. Egan from our EDC, and certainly when somebody comes to visit with us, we try to get to yes. You know, that's kind of our mantra, and so we try to do that. So.
Good enough, thanks. Rye Township, no concern at this point, opposition to the annexation that we're aware of?
They are not, no, and obviously we've just met with their chair, and then they've been constructive, and we've had a longer term relationship just because we permitted a solid waste landfill. So back in, that 2007-8 time period, we had a lot of engagement with Rye Township, and they've always been constructive to work with and realistic and understanding of progress has to move forward, and they've only let us know a few landmines out there that if we could make sure that that they know of. And so I think they're going to be a really great partner to work with too.
Great. And then the last thing I have is Agassiz. That would only be for potable water, right?
That would be for potable water. The only difference is, they are, one of the best parts, because Agassiz Rural Water, if you think of Agassiz Rural Water, they're everything north of Grand Forks. And so if you look where Fufang is, and then there's the diversion ditch and everything north, if Fufang does move forward, there's going to be probably lots of opportunities for agribusiness that will not be in the city of Grand Forks proper, but maybe just outside. But will need service from us from a wastewater and perspective, and even maybe water, and from a water supply perspective. So I think it's going to change their entire paradigm, to be frank, with this industry that's coming in. So I think what we're going to do if we go forward to the State Water Commission, ask for funding, is that we're working with them as our rural water provider because they're better able to act, but we're going to probably ask them to build bigger infrastructure for us, and we may become a system supplier for them. They may buy our water, but it'll be their system. But we want them to appropriately size their infrastructure as we move forward. So again, they've been another great partner. And it's all about doing the right thing and doing things for the greater good. And those are the conversations we have, is we're going to do what makes sense on these border issues.
Seems like a great project for Grand Forks.
Yeah.
Pretty good news for Manville also.
Yeah.
I'll move approval.
There's a motion by Weber. Is there a second by Weigel? Mr. Bean, questions?
Yeah, Mr. Phelan, at least I saw somewhat on the maps how we're developing out there. Is it worthwhile to start looking at like a heavy industrial park, agribusiness area? So we're not just looking at now these two locations and the landfill, but there could be others. And I look at it somewhat in comparison to Spiritwood by what am I thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is it something that, and we can look at long-term infrastructure for even a larger aspect of this, especially if we get natural gas here, what more might we bring into the community?
Council President Sandy and Councilmember Bean, I think that's a very good idea. We had that idea with NPN, that could be a heavy industrial area. And I think with this coming in along that corridor, I think we want to build the infrastructure to to fill that in. And I think probably the largest limiter of what we can do out there, we're going to have to be smart about, is probably the nearness of the airport, right? And so these are all great sites, perfect place, the land's not very good, and it's this alkali soil, and it's further from the city, but we got to make sure that we don't do anything to harm the airport too. And when you're talking heavy industry, you worry about plumes and stack heights and thermal things. So those are the things that we're going to have to make sure that we're smart about long term.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, there's a motion and second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Egan. Appreciate your time.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Item 2.5, land purchase. Mr. Phelan.
Thank you, Council President Sandy. So I'm going to start off, and then Maureen's going to get to the particulars. And so if I recall, this is green pulp. So the red marks in this orange, or the yellow, I should say, was going to be the site of green pulp. And green pulp was planning to take, and it was introduced to us by a gentleman from Minneapolis. And I think the developers at the time in this, I'm going to call it 2015, 16 timeframe, plus or minus if I can remember, it was going to be a Chinese investment back in the day when there was less concern over Chinese investments, if you can believe that. But they were going to take straw and they were going to make it into various products. And what the city did at this time, and some of the lessons learned, is that we put infrastructure in this area in anticipation that the green pulp development would move forward. And so what the city did is that we expanded right here in this location, the stormwater pond, to serve this area. We also extended the street that goes through here. We also put water up there, potable water, fire protection water. And then we also built a wastewater pump station and sanitary sewer up in this location. While we were doing that, then there's another project came in that we've been hearing about too, is Red River Biorefinery that came in. So this is Red River Biorefinery right here. This is their location right here. And so these two projects were working in parallel. Red River Biorefinery moved forward, and green pulp did not move forward. And in both of these projects, what maybe a lesson learned is that we don't have development agreements here. When developers come with their projects are smaller like this, we just would put in infrastructure in advance. And then what happens is if you don't move forward as part of your development, there's a large amount of special assessments on this particular lot. I think we're going to go over the particulars, but I think if you all toll it, add it up, there's about $600,000 worth of assessments in this area. So I should also say, as part of the development, and you've also heard about the Corinta land, why the city of Grand Forks is part of this development in the Red River Biorefinery. This was, both properties were purchased from the Corintas, and the Corintas wanted to make sure that the city wouldn't just annex all their property up here. So when we've talked about Fufeng on, and then there's this Corinta part. Well, they engaged with the city, and the city agreed that we would not annex them under various conditions. Okay, so but this got really this agribusiness development going in this particular area. So with that, as part of the development, the city owns this lot right here. So when the developer wanted to build this road, they wanted to build the road in that shape. I don't know why, but they wanted to, and we complied with it. As part of that, we did purchase this lot as part of the transaction. A city owns this stormwater lot. We own this where we have clay borrow right here in this area. And then this is the police department lot for sailing goods up there. So that's kind of what's in this area. This is the anaerobic digester of J.R. Simplot. And this is Philadelphia Macaroni right here. So longer story longer, the developer and the owner of the property just couldn't pay the special assessments. The project wasn't going to move forward, so they just quit paying. And I think Maureen will go through the particulars of how long you have until it goes back to the county. Lo and behold, I think we have an opportunity for very little to incorporate this into the city portfolio and probably incorporate that as part of this development, this land that we own here. And I think if you move forward with this, I think the city can move it to our JDA portfolio or growth fund portfolio and look for opportunities in the future where this might come in real handy as part of a development for the greater good of the city of Grand Forks as we move forward. So I'd ask Maureen to kind of tell you about the particulars.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Todd. President Sandy, members of the committee. So Todd went through most of this with you, and in your staff report you'll find, but it's state law that property that goes 3 years delinquent in paying their property taxes, it goes back to the county. With this in particular, any property that acquired by the county is subject to a special assessment lien by a city, which we do. We as a city may request that the county sell that back to the city. We do have, and in part of this transaction, well, maybe I'll back up. The county does hold a public auction that was held on November 15th. So there was an opportunity to make bids at that time, and nobody took advantage of that. At this point, if the city chooses to purchase this from the county, it's a transaction of $25 to the Grand Forks County. The Grand Forks County will write off any property taxes that are owing on or past due delinquent on the property, and then we have approximately $235,000 in special assessments that we would look to write off. The remainder would stay on the property and make annual payments. So those come from various sources depending on the project involved, whether it's water, stormwater, paving, the like.
Any questions for Mr. Phelan or Ms. Storstad? Mr.
So
Weber?
the cost for us, we can pick it up for almost nothing, but then property tax and specials payments until we find a buyer.
And as a city, we'd be exempt from any property taxes, but we would be making the annual special assessment
making
payments
the
to
special.
ourselves, basically, yes.
Yeah, of course, we're exempt. Very good. Thanks. I'll move approval.
Great. Mr. Weber moves approval, second by Veen. Further questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the land purchase signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.6, amend Grand Forks City Code, Section 8-1203, Paragraph 2, relating to snowmobile routes, restrictions, and regulations. Mr. Phelan.
Council President Sandy, members of the committee of the whole, Mr. Goss is also with me, but it's a simple change that, per your direction, is to move the policy making of snowmobile routes from the police chief to the city council. And I probably came a little late as your city administrator to this snowmobile route game, but as I look back to the forensics of what happened in this case, it's caused some heated conversations on this whole thing. And so, because I was here in 2002 as a public works director, but I know then and I know now how important the Greenway was when it was set up, and that's why, this came during, we were developing the Greenway. It was an important thing, and it was also discussing various uses. And I knew at the time, the city council at the time certainly delegated the authority to the police chief at the time. However, they delegated that to the police chief with a specific map, and the city council back in the early 2000s certainly they were our boss, and they let us know that it was delegated under a specific map, and that map was not going to include snowmobiles going through the Greenway. However, we're 20 years later, and I think people want to take another look at it as we move forward. I think one of the things we should have done, knowing that certainly we all have authority to do a lot of things, but it's one thing to have the authority, the other part is being able to complete it without getting a lot of public uproar. So one of the mistakes that we made, and this is my mea culpa, is that we should have come to the city council to say there's a request to expand service, in this case snowmobiles, in areas of the Greenway that have not existed, that the city council, previous city councils did not want them to enter. And we should have asked you up front: is this an area that you want to explore? And I think what we did in this case, administratively, we worked with various groups. They did work over the last several months, and then when something doesn't move forward, it makes people feel quite disappointed. The other part that we didn't do, and we have Council Member Lunsky and Weber, I don't think we informed you till the very late process that this was going on. And so I think if there's a failure that we did, it was a failure, we should have come to you first to say there's a request, and before we expend all this time, energy, and resources from people, we should have asked you if you're interested in that. So I think we've come full circle to putting this back in City Council hand, and now really, once we get this change, Council President Sandy and the committee as a whole, we want to work with you on a process to further engage, so that when, before next winter, we can have a fuller engaged process, and with you folks as the lead, and certainly we're all, as the administration, we're here to implement policy, not make policy. And so I'm sorry that we didn't do that. We should have followed up with you first to ask if there was any interest. It would have then broadened it to the public then, that this is even being discussed before we went through. So I think a lot of meaningful people did meaningful things to try to get to yes and do good things. And probably the one step we should have started with you first. So I apologize for that. And with that, I'd hand it back over to you, Council President Sandy.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. Is there anyone who wants to add to this discussion? Mr. Weigel?
I don't have anything to add. I think the new ordinance is pretty simple. I do think that obviously it'll still need to be in consultation with our chief, because there is public safety concerns there, but I'm good with it the way it's written. I'll move approval.
So there's a motion by Weigel. Is there a second to that motion to update the second by Veen? Are there further comments? Mr. Weber, something to add?
Yes, if I may. Thank you, President Sandy. For the last 10 winters, the police chief, previous to Chief Nelson and since with Chief Nelson, the snow route has come forward to council just for our information. And I've quietly just gone along with it. It seemed like that's the way we've been doing things. There were snowmobiles on the Greenway, but it didn't seem like it was anything worth making a battle over. This year, we've come to the conclusion that the main reason for the route, 42nd Street, is no longer safe. And so there's seeking out for an alternative to that route that's no longer safe. And so my understanding is the Snowmobile Club took it upon themselves, took the initiative to mow a route along the Greenway that they did not have permission or authorization from law enforcement or from Ms. Greendahl at the Greenway to do that, which my understanding that's illegal. This is an area, no motorized vehicles, and they certainly didn't have authorization to go in and mow that route. There's been some discussion to the contrary, but that's what I understand from conversations with Ms. Greendahl and with Chief Nelson, that the snowmobile clubs did not have permission or authorization to mow that route.
And Mr. Weber, that's contrary to what's being propagated on social media and on the radio in our community. People from the Snowmobile Club are actively saying that they were given authorization, but you're saying to the contrary to that, they were not given authorization. I believe what you're saying is accurate. I've been told the same thing, but that is in direct contradiction to what leadership of the Snowmobile Club is actively saying. They're telling people that we gave them authorization, and then it was a bait and switch, and we pulled it away from them. So I don't understand what the confusion is, or why there is some sort of a misunderstanding on this issue. But thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, President Sandy. At this point, looking back over the last 10 years, I actually feel quite badly. I've we make votes that we might regret later on, but, and I don't think we ever actually voted on that, but we gave a green light to it. And I feel badly that I just went along with snowmobiles being approved for the part of the Greenway from Gateway up to Demers. I don't see why we impose that on those neighborhoods. I didn't want it in my neighborhood, or and I was representing that was part of Ward 3 at one time. So what I would like to see us move towards is, we've come to the point where it no longer makes sense for us to have snowmobiles in the city. If 42nd Street was the reason for having that route and now it's no longer safe, I think it's time for us to move to just a prohibition against snowmobiles in the city, the same as Fargo and West Fargo. And also the current fine structure almost encourages this. $26 is the current fine, and yet the fine for operating a motorized vehicle is far in excess of that. So it's like we're giving basic permission for snowmobiles to ride on the Greenway. And there's no real way for law enforcement to enforce that. So I'd like to see us move towards a complete ban, and especially in light of what I've seen over the last week or so. And I don't know if this relates to what you were mentioning, President Sandy, about comments on social media, comments on the radio, but it seems like almost intentional abuse of the groomed ski tracks, the groomed ski trails on the Greenway, and people using the unauthorized route, but also then, and this is part of why I was concerned about the unauthorized route to begin with, there are people on that unauthorized route, but then they make the rest of the Greenway kind of a playground, and there have been snowmobiles all over the area that I frequent most often, Lincoln Park and Kanowski. So this would come back to us for further discussion, right?
Yep. And Council
Thanks.
President Sandy, just so we don't confuse, we do have an official route map that our police chief has approved that includes in certain areas that you can do it. So our plan is that will continue through this winter season. And then once, at some point next year, there'll be engagement with City Council about kind of a longer term strategy beyond this year.
Very good.
Because we approved the route last council meeting. We actually approved the route that was recommended by the police chief.
Well, was it ours to approve, or do we just?
We were informing you.
We were
Yeah,
informed.
sure.
The city
Right.
administration has
We
approved
did not
that.
object to it. How's
You
that?
did not object to it.
And so tonight, we're voting that there needs to be a shift, and in the future, that will come to City Council.
Yes.
And that will hopefully be part of this larger discussion, at
Yeah.
which point I plan to raise the hope that we can just prohibit them from the city and review the fee structure at that time. Thanks for letting me go on.
You'll
and on
have
for so long.
one reading at City Council next week, the 19th, and then one in January, and then officially it'll be a City Council responsibility, and soon thereafter, we'll engage you as part of whatever process you want to do to ultimately make a recommendation to yourself.
An ordinance change requires 2 readings from
Yeah.
council, so we'll get two more times to discuss this. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other comments? Or yes, Ms. Osowski?
I just have one comment to follow with Mr. Weber. You know, we're up here, we're approving robots to go around and deliver food. We're approving scooters to drive around on our city streets, and yet you're coming down on snowmobiles. I mean, yes, they're a little loud, but I do think that there is room in the city for everybody.
Motorized vehicles are allowed on our city streets. They're not allowed on the Greenway.
Ms. Lunsky?
I was just curious about the signage that was put up. Was that able to be removed from the Greenway?
Yeah. Kim Greendahl has nodded yes. I think that our Public Works crews.
Okay.
So I think as part of that, there were those markers that were put up, and my understanding is the Greenway Technical Committee that was set up by the City Council to kind of review the day-to-day operation of our Greenway, that they authorized those to be put in just so people could see what a route would look like, those markers. And so I did ask Ms. Greendahl, since it, obviously we're not going to move forward with that route, to take those down over the weekend, so there's no confusion.
And hopefully the traffic that I've seen down there has been innocent, that they were just thinking they were on an authorized trail that was not authorized. So I'm glad that the signs are down and we eliminate some of that confusion.
And I think,
Thanks.
Mr. Weber, to your concern about the fines, Mr. Gosta did provide some information. I would consider a snowmobile a motorized vehicle. And so I don't know then, Mr. Gosted, who makes the decision to provide what sort of citation to somebody that's riding a snowmobile on the Greenway, and/or who would prosecute that if it ended up in court. I assume the city prosecutor would do that.
Yep, Council President Sandy, you're correct. There would be first you'd have the police officer make that discretionary decision as to whether they violated that particular ordinance, and then if it's been cited, it would be brought to municipal court and the city prosecutor to handle the action.
Okay, thank you. So I think it would be discretionary. I think that should be part of the greater discussion when we talk about this for the future. So, okay, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.6, no, I'm sorry, item 2.7, create district for city project 8619, District 774, 2023 mill and overlay. Mr. Lieberman.
Good evening, Council President Sandy, members of the committee. This proposed project in front of you is a large portion of our 2023 asphalt mill and overlay requirement. As is our normal process, the engineering department sends engineers out. We assess various pavements around the city and develop a priority list which generates these requirements. The streets in front of you are rose to the top of that priority list for mill and overlay construction in 2023. We collectively just refer to this as the UND neighborhood. It is just north of University Avenue and just west of Columbia Road. Actually consists of 5 different streets, which are Hamline Street, Cambridge, Harvard, Princeton, and Fifth Avenue North. These are all local streets. They were constructed a number of years ago. They were last milled and overlaid 24 years ago in 1999. So they have gotten a good long lifespan, and they are definitely due for asphalt mill and overlay. Since this is rehabilitation work, they do qualify for 80% city cost share, which is budgeted for in the 2023 budget. The total estimate is $582,000 for this work, of which $465,000 would come from Fund 4815. The remainder would be special assessed to the benefiting properties. So with that, the engineering department recommends approval of the engineer's report, creation of the special assessment district, and directing the engineering department to develop plans and specifications.
Comments or questions from Mr. Lieberman? Mr. Weigel moves approval. Is there a second by Weber? Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.8, create district for projects 8461, 62, 63, and 64. District 584, 354, 585, 763, sanitary, sewer, water main, storm, paving, streetlights, 45th Avenue South, 19th Street to the south end, Drameway. Mr. Lieberman.
Thank you again, President Sandy. This is new construction in the Edgewood Village second re-subdivision area. This is infill work. It consists of providing public utilities, pavements, streetlights, which would provide the developer roughly 35 residential lots for construction. The developer in this case is Thompson Homes, and they have requested this work be done through special assessment to be accepted by the city for operation and maintenance. This project, since it is new residential construction, does qualify for the waiver of the letter of credit and the 3-year deferral of special assessments as approved by City Council previously this year. The total estimated cost of construction is roughly $968,000. With the staff report, you'll see 4 different assessment districts that would be created for this. They're all fairly simple to that specific street, 41st Avenue. So with that, engineering recommends approval of the engineer's reports, creation of these 4 districts, and directing engineering to develop plans and specifications.
Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Questions or comments? Is there a motion by Weigel? Second by Weber. Thank you, Mr. Weber. Any other comments? Anybody? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Item 2.9, Design Engineering Service Agreement for Project 8071, North End Reliever Sanitary Force Main. Ms. Severson, good evening.
Good evening. So this project was brought back to you guys in November when we accepted the FEMA funding that we got. So engineering advertised for 3 weeks and we accepted proposals. We only received one proposal from WFW, but we still interviewed them and they demonstrated that they're well qualified based on previous work. So we're going to go ahead and offer that agreement with them. Like I said, that back in November, we had that funding, and that was 75-25. The agreement is $309,690, and our 25% would be $77,422. So with that, we'll approve the task order agreement with WFW.
Questions, comments? Is there a move by Weber, second by Osowski? No other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 210, request for qualifications for consulting engineering services for 2023 and 24, Project 8647. Ms. Severson.
Good evening. So this is something we haven't done since 2019. We go out for RFQ in the paper and advertise for 3 weeks again, and we received proposals from a number of firms. On the second sheet of the handout is the types of services we ask of them, and then they send back what they're qualified to do, and then we review them internally. Again, like I said, we haven't done it since 2019, so now is the time to do it. So this will be good for 2023 and 2024, and then we have the ability to extend it for 2025 and 2026.
This is information only. Anyone have any questions? Thank you very much. Item 211, CPMA and PE reimbursement agreement for Project 8656 intersection improvements, Belmont and South Fifth Street. Good evening.
Thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. So you might recall a couple weeks ago, we were notified that we got awarded funding for the Urban Grant Program, about $1.3 million to do an intersection improvement project at Belmont Road and South Fifth Street. So because we have federal money on that project, there are some different strings that are attached, and one of those requirements is that we enter into a couple different agreements with the North Dakota Department of Transportation. So here tonight, we've got 2 different agreements. The first one is a cost participation construction and maintenance agreement. And basically what this agreement does is it allows us to utilize that $1.3 million worth of funding, and then it specifies who's going to maintain what, who's going to pay for what on the project once the project's constructed and moving forward. The second agreement that we've got for this project is a preliminary engineering reimbursement agreement. We are anticipating that we're going to use some of that $1.3 million federal dollars to pay for some of the consulting engineering. And if we're going to use the federal money on the consulting engineering, we have to enter into this agreement with the North Dakota Department of Transportation. It essentially just says that if the city were to drastically change the scope of the project in a way that increases the consulting engineering costs, we would be responsible for that. So these are both pretty standard agreements that we enter into with the North Dakota Department of Transportation for our federally funded projects. So staff is recommending that we approve both of these agreements for the project.
And that concept also goes for 212 and 213 on the
Correct.
preliminary engineering reimbursement agreements for the other projects as well, yes?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Any questions regarding item 211? Yes, Mr. Weber.
The staff report shows where that is on a map. I guess it's too early to start showing design ideas so we get a sense of what the intersection would look like.
So we're still in the pretty early development phases of this project, but up until this point, we've been conceptualizing a roundabout at that intersection as likely the best alternative. We've talked to a couple of the property owners around that area and have gotten some preliminary buy-off on that, so that's what we're leaning into right now.
Exciting. I'll move approval.
Great. Moved by Weber, second by Lunsky. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 212, the engineering reimbursement agreement for Project 8659 turn lane improvements, US 2 and US 81.
Thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. So this project is some turn lane improvements on Gateway Drive. With some of the proposed discussions on development up on the north end, we had a traffic study done to look at some of the impacts of the increased traffic due to those developments on some of our infrastructure. And that traffic study indicated that some extensions on some turn lanes, as well as the construction of a new turn lane, would be necessary. So this project is looking to address the eastbound left turn lane at Gateway Drive and 42nd, the westbound right turn lane at Gateway Drive and 42nd, constructing a new turn lane that is southbound rights at Gateway Drive and 42nd, and then extending the southbound left turn lane at Washington and Gateway Drive. And much like the projects we just discussed, this one is utilizing federal money. The DOT has been really good partners with us on this one and have pledged about $510,000 between federal money and state money, which covers about 93% of this project. So it's a really good financial step for us on these improvements. And because that is federal money tied to it, we have to go through the same processes that we do with all our projects. And some of this money would be used towards consulting engineering, necessitating that preliminary engineering reimbursement agreement. So we're looking for approval on that agreement, same type of agreement as before.
So if we change the parameters, or back out, we're stuck with the cost that went into it.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. Thank you. Questions, comments,
If
Mr.
I
Weber?
may.
Yes, sir.
Especially in relation to what's just been said. Are these proposals, do they affect the larger discussion about the mill spur that was taking place a year or so ago? Would this end those discussions, or are those still active?
When you bring up the mill spur, are you referring to like a grade separated crossing at the 42nd and Gateway, or?
That was one of the options, or rerouting that, or whatever. There was a lot of ideas kind of thrown about at one time.
So these improvements, I think, operate separately from that discussion. They're
Very
just specifically based on the increases in truck traffic that we're expecting to see from some of the developments on the north end of town.
Right.
I don't think it kicks any of those discussions out or puts these ahead of them. It's just improvements that we will need because of these
Very good.
changes in
Thanks.
traffic.
I'll move approval.
Okay, moved by Weber, second by Weigel. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. And lastly, on the same tone, item 213, engineering reimbursement agreement, project 8667, concrete panel repair and grind for US Highway 2 and I-29 Red River.
Thank you, President Sandy. One more preliminary engineering reimbursement agreement, this time for a CPR and grind project on US Highway 2, Gateway Drive, from the interstate all the way to the Red River. So this project is not projected to take place until 2026, but with some of the different federal dollars moving around out there, the DOT wants to get ahead on a lot of these projects just in case some things move around. So this project would essentially be just concrete repairs from the interstate to the Red River on Gateway Drive. This project, because it's on a primary regional road, it is funded 80% federal, 20% state, so the city doesn't actually have a financial contribution to this one, but we would be on the hook for maintenance because it's within our city limits. And because that federal money is attached to the project, once again, preliminary engineering reimbursement agreement, where if we change the parameters, we are responsible for those increased costs.
Great. All right, moved by Weigel. Is there a second? Second by Osowski. Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Danielson. On 214, award of transportation alternatives program funds for project 8604 South 48th Street shared use path from 32nd Avenue South to 17th Avenue South. Mr. Danielson.
Thank you, President Sandy, members of the committee. So this project is a shared use path project along South 48th Street from 32nd Avenue South up to 17th Avenue South. It would be a continuation of the project that we just constructed this year along 32nd Avenue from about Tractor Supply out to South 48th Street. Just to give some background information on the transportation alternative project, we submitted for a shortened version of this project last fall, and that application got returned to us earlier this spring with some information that the program parameters were changing, and the main difference now is that the cap got removed on the program. So previously there was a $292,000 cap on it, but that got taken out. So we put together a new application and submitted that under your guys' approval this summer with an extended project that now has the limits that you see today. Last week, we were notified that we were awarded $637,000 to construct this program through the Transportation Alternatives Program. And that only covers construction engineering, and it's on an 80-20 split. So the city would still be responsible for 20% of the construction costs, plus any engineering fees or testing fees that would come out of the project as well. And it's worth noting that we asked for about $880,000, but we're only awarded that $640,000, so we didn't get everything we asked for. So rather than about a 70-30 split when it's all said and done, it's probably closer to like a 50-50 split. But given where this shared use path is, we still find this as staff to be the most financially reasonable way to approach this project. So we are recommending accepting the funding for this project, approving any necessary budget amendments, and then proceeding with the project development.
Mr. Danielson, where are the funds where are the Grand Forks City funds coming to pay for this?
Dave might have to correct me on this. Is it 4815 on these ones? Yeah, these ones do come out of 4815. That's the street and infrastructure program.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a big fan of bike infrastructure and infrastructure like this. Do we have any idea how many people are riding bikes to work out in the industrial park?
I don't think we have an exact number off the top of our head. No.
That was probably more of a rhetorical question, actually.
You get more once
We may get more, right?
And there are struggles getting public transit out there.
Right. Yes, there are, and we've heard of that several times. Any comments? Any thoughts? Moved by Weber, or second by Veen. Further commentary? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 215, budget amendments. Part A is Public Works. Ms. Lipsch, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, council members. My request before you is to amend two budgets, street budget and sanitation budgets. In both budgets, we're amending fuel and vehicle maintenance fees. And in the streets only budget, we are amending cutting edges, brooms, and sand and salt expenses.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Moved by Weigel, second by Weber. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Items B, C, and D are all related to the Health Department FEMA reimbursements for COVID-19 and the opioid response grant.
President
Swanson, good
Sandy,
evening.
members of the committee, you have before you three budget amendments for the Health Department. I am uncertain as to whether you want to take them all as one action item, or would you like me to separate them out?
You may as well give us the goods on all of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
The first two are related to our COVID response activities, COVID-19 response activities during the past year. We've been working with the Finance Department to recover some of our costs related to our ongoing testing, vaccination operations, and also a small amount of funding that we used for isolation and quarantine for persons experiencing homelessness. We've worked with the Finance Department to do all the draws of the eligible expenses. They've done that. They've been approved by FEMA, and the funding will now be reimbursed to the city. Therefore, the budgets need to be amended for those amounts. The third item is a budget amendment for our opioid response program. The narrative is there for your review. This basically represents additional funding that has been received by the department for program expenses and also for a startup of a treatment program in our community that's been a very valuable asset. And Michael Dulitz is here. He is responsible for our opioid response program, and he can answer any questions related to the third of these three budget amendments. And we're requesting your approval.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Are there questions related to this? Mr. Weber, you move, is there a second? Second by Veen. Now comments. Ms. Osowski, yes, ma'am.
Hello, Debbie. I just want to make sure that I understand this process a little bit. So During 2022, the Department of Health spent a bunch of money. Now, did we know that we were getting reimbursed by FEMA while this money was being spent?
President Sandy, members of the committee, and Councilmember Osowski, yes, we had assurances from FEMA that 100% of our costs related to the testing and vaccination efforts would be reimbursed. That was 100% through the end of June, and then after that, it was reimbursed at 90%. And we entered into an agreement with our community partners that we would continue to operate the testing agreement, knowing that because we had the availability to draw down the FEMA funds, whereas others might not have been able to do that.
So it was not brought to the committee if we could spend this money and then be reimbursed? And also, was it ever voted on about the cost share at all?
President Sandy, members of the committee, and Councilwoman Osowski, this was a continuation of our response from 2020 through 2021 and into 2022. And our activities were determined largely by things like meetings with other partners, the community need, the epidemiology of the disease, our dashboard, our rates of infection and various things like that. We also worked with our partners to ensure that we distributed the workload of COVID response across all partners and that everyone was contributing what they could. I'm not aware of a council vote, but perhaps others recall that.
No, I'm not sure that we voted for this last year, but I think probably based upon the previous council's consensus of what had been going on, I don't think it would be a leap for the health department to continue doing what they had been doing up through this year as part of that normal process of what we had already approved. So.
I mean, I agree. I do think that these things should be brought back yearly, though, instead of having unelected officials just kind of make those types of assumptions. You know, it looks like the Department of Health is getting refunded for their costs associated with COVID, but at the same time, the people who actually suffered from it, the people whose businesses were shut down, the people with vaccine damage, anything like that, they're not being compensated. Also, you guys have basically doubled your budget, almost doubled your budget in the past couple of years with COVID money. And so how long do we plan on doing this? You know, is this done at the end of 2022? Are you guys continuing to get like is FEMA coming to you guys saying you guys can have this money if you continue to push this agenda?
Council President Sandy, members of the committee, and Councilwoman Osowski, I'll do the best that I can to answer your questions. It sounds like there were several questions within what you just stated. And so I'll try to answer them. I'm not sure if I'll have them in the exact order that you did. The health department makes decisions based on emergency orders. The current federal emergency order expires January 11th. We would not be able to get FEMA money beyond January 11th for the expenses that we're currently getting FEMA funding for. This funding isn't part of our budget per se. It reimburses many individuals and organizations within the community that have been doing this work. It's true that the Grand Forks Public Health Department has realized some significant funds for COVID, but it's been a pretty unprecedented pandemic. In my 38 years of practicing public health, we've never experienced anything like this, and I think the resources that have been devoted to it have been what has been necessary to protect our community and to keep our residents of Grand Forks County safe. I believe you may have had one more question, and I'm not sure it was. I think the question was about continuing to test. We've had a request to continue our testing site at UND, and we have secured funding to do that. That would be no cost to the city. It would not require FEMA reimbursement, but it would be additional funding that the State Health Department has. It would be probably a short-term endeavor if we decide to do this. We're visiting with our partners right now. One of the reasons we would consider it is because we also have unprecedented upper and lower respiratory disease in our community right now with our three viruses that are circulating right now, RSV, influenza, and COVID. And by doing COVID testing in the community, it helps to rule that out so that people can seek the health care that they need. So if we do decide to do it, it would be a very short-term thing and wouldn't involve city funding per se.
Who requested you to do it? You said that you're being requested to continue this. By who?
By community partners that are experiencing either stress on their healthcare systems and the state health department. And within our own organization, we can see the rise in COVID cases. Transmission is occurring, and we feel like it would be an important thing to do in order to determine what the level of COVID transmission is in the community. Without community testing, we have no idea.
Yeah, I did take a look at some of those tests that were sitting down in the entryway a few weeks ago, and they were expired. And so, I mean, that was money obviously being flushed down the drain with just expired tests sitting out there. So how much in demand is this testing?
The testing has decreased in the community setting and largely because of the home testing kits. The ones that have an expired date on them have been extended now, and so there are extended dates on that, and there's a QR code on there where you can seek out the actual date that they're good for. The home testing has been a wonderful thing. It's been a great tool for us, but it doesn't tell us what our transmission rates are in the community because they're not reported.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Osowski. Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Good, really good information for the community. So there's a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Weigel?
Maybe for Mr. Dulitz, maybe beginning of the new year, just an update on the opioid response, where we're at, how's it going? Maybe just a short presentation on that in February or January.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So there's a motion and a second on 215, parts B, C, and D. Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Ms. Swanson, is this your last meeting? Will you?
I will be here for another month, and the recruitment process has begun for my successor.
Great, thank you. Look forward to seeing you next week, next month. Okay, item E, Police Department State Homeland Security Grant.
I'll move approval.
Moved by Weigel, second by Osowski. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 216, new sanitation rates. There were new sanitation rates listed. Anybody have any questions or comments on solid waste being delivered and additional tires and whatnot?
Move
Mr.
approval.
Weigel moves approval, second by Weber. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Does anybody want to meet on December 27th?
Move
No,
to
let's
cancel.
not meet on the 27th. We don't need to vote on that. Mr. Weigel, anything to add for the good of the order tonight?
I move we adjourn.
So motion and a second. Anyone else with anything to add tonight? I did want to say again, I continue to hear people bad-mouthing Miss Greendahl. Both, I see it online and I'm hearing it on the radio, and it's totally unwarranted and unnecessary. And the people that continue to propagate that are the people that want us to do them a favor. And so the more I continue to hear the additional unnecessary statements about her, and frankly, the lies that are being propagated about things that I've said, it's drawing very old. Anyway, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you.